inspiring leaders in Asia who want to expand to become influential change makers. So we, as the teachers and as the lecturers here, want to, we hope that, and actually some of you are the young leaders here, especially in environmental field, and we believe that you will be our future leaders. So I would like you to hear the presentation from Coach Wouter, and without further ado, it is time for the Coach Wouter to have the talk.
Thank you very much, Vice P. And I'm really happy to meet all of you. Can you hear? So, in the back, yes? Okay, great. So, it's really exciting for me to be with you here this morning. And I want to start by asking you what you want to hear. If you think about leadership, who wants to become an influential change maker, to make a difference? Who would like to do that? Okay, I see one hand, 2, 3. Okay, now a few more, right? So you want to make a difference, right? So let me start by asking you the question: what would you like to learn? What bothers you? What concerns you? Tell me something. You raise your hand first. So,
all I want to hear from Mr. Wouter is about the managerial and leadership engineering sciences.
engineering. Okay. Yeah. All right. Who else wants to ask a question? What you want to learn this morning? What's the question that you want to answer? Any volunteer? Raise your hand. Dean has said, becoming a leader means you have to step up, right? So I'm giving you the chance. Who would like to ask a question before I give my talk? We heard from one gentleman. What about the lady? What about on this side of the room? What would you like to learn this morning? What's your interest? If I don't know what your interest is, maybe what I say it's not relevant to your needs, right? So, anybody want to say? Yes, please.
All I want to know from you this morning, okay, what's the simple thing to become really simple.
Very simple thing. Okay. I think I can give you something that's simple and you can use every day. Does that sound good? Okay. Anybody else want to ask a question? We are here in USAKTI University. 3 means 3, right? So we already have 2 questions. So there's one more question. Who would like to ask something? Yes.
I would like to know what is personal power means and how that personal powers can be an influential change around the leader.
Thank you. That's a really powerful reflection that you're giving us. Question: what is personal power? So what kind of powers are there in the world? Now, there's a new president in Indonesia, right? Does he have power? What kind of power does he have? Okay, so there's one thing about leadership. You have to speak up. So So I challenge you this morning, if you want to share. I'm the type of person I like to hear from you. So you are welcome anytime to stand up, to raise your hand, and to speak up. You cannot be an influencer without a voice, right? So practice this morning. You're very welcome to do that. I'm with you, we're having a conversation this morning. I'm going to share, then I'm going to expect more discussion and questions. And I also, if there's enough time, I have an exercise. It takes about 20 minutes. Are you interested in doing an exercise? Okay, great. So, back to my question. President Jokowi, his power is based on what?
I think his power is based on his humility.
It's a very interesting answer because he has several sources of power, right? One is the constitution of your country, of Indonesia, that he is now the president, so he can take decision and other people have to follow the decision, right? But that's not what you said. You said he has a power because of something inside him. Now you see the difference? You can be a powerful person because of a position, and we're talking here about the highest level of the power in a person in Indonesia is in the president, right? But the one you said is that something inside him that makes him powerful, that makes people listen to him and follow him, take seriously what he says. So, to be a leader, it can help if you have a position of power. Maybe you become the manager of a company or the director of a department in the government, or you set up your own company. You are then the head of your own company, right? It gives you power. But we are also going to talk about another kind of power, which is what you mentioned that President Jokowi has, that makes you listen to him. That is something that comes from inside. Now, I believe that even people who have a position of power, the real influence they have, it does not only depend on their position or how much money they control, but it is something inside. That's what I mostly want to have a conversation with you about today. The advantage of this is that if you cultivate your personal power, you can use it anytime, anywhere, with whatever situation you're in, because that always goes with you. You cannot actually switch off that power, right? So, and in that way, you can always make a difference anywhere you are. Not just because you are put in a position as a manager or a director or a CEO or an advisor, but because there's something in you that causes other people to listen and to take you seriously. And you have also the ability to bring out the best in other people. So I would say, in that way, that leadership it starts as an inside job. You can read it in a book. In fact, have you tried? If you go to the bookshop, there are many books about leadership. And the books are helpful. And some of the things I'm going to share with you can be helpful. But it's really only helpful if you practice it by yourself. Okay, thank you for your questions. So I'd like to share some thoughts. And so a few things I will share are some, what I call models. 4 models. And some of them are very, very simple. One model is that leadership is in your hand. So you always travel with your hand, right? Your hand is always with you. So sometimes when you don't really know, remember how to be the best leader you can be, you just remember your hand. You don't need a gadget, not even a pen and paper. So that's the very simple model. But I will also share with you some model that requires you to think more. Even using your academic skills. This is called the integral theory model. And when you practice this, it will also really help you, but it's not that easy. You have to really think, use your mind power. And then at the end, the exercise I want to ask you to do in groups of 2, you are already sitting in 2s, so you can easily do this exercise. That is more about asking questions and listening. Because being a leader is not just talking, it's really having a connection with the people around you, and that comes from listening. Are some of you familiar with Ganesha? Who has heard about Ganesha? Ganesha? Who has heard about Ganesha? Ganesha is one of the gods, you can say, in India, and is the god of wisdom. And also in India they say Ganesha is the remover of obstacles. That's really handy, right? Because in our life we always have obstacles. And the symbol of Ganesha is the head of an elephant. So what does the elephant have? It has 2 big ears and 1 mouth, trunk, right? So the purpose is that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. But generally in life, are we all experts in listening, or are we more talkers? Even now I'm talking with you, but I'm trying to listen at the same time. So the exercise is actually about more about listening. So one of the ways to be influential as a leader is to be a good listener. Okay, so I believe that some of the things things I share with you are practical to you. So we are here in a city. I live in a city. I live most of my time in the city of Manila, but I also like to live in the rural area. And when you think about environment and development, it's not only about the city, but you also have to have your relationship. And maybe some of you come from a province, a more rural area. Who comes from a small town or a rural area, your hometown? Are you all, yes? I come from a small town in the Netherlands. Who of you comes from a very small town or village or small community? Or are you all grown up in the city? Yeah, more than half of the population nowadays comes from cities. But when you look at the environment, you know that's not the only thing to consider, right? Thank you. Okay, so who is Coach Wouter? Already Rice being introduced a little bit. Most of my career, I work in Asia, already 30 years. And I started university in the class of 1975. Anybody was born then? You know, I love what I do. I consider myself really lucky. I love my job, I love my area of expertise, and I still consider myself young, because I'm young at heart. So when you have a chance to do in life what you love doing, or you create such opportunities for yourself, then you can be a happy person and live I think, a good life. So maybe later you can see this in the PDF. And there's some references here to what I have done. Now I work as a leadership coach. So I help people discover what it means to be a leader. That's partly awareness inside. We're going to practice some of that today. But it also has some skills as well. So I'm also a teacher. I teach leadership development courses where you sit like for a week and do many more exercises. I'm also developing an online program for people who don't have time to all get together to study leadership in their own time. So maybe later you might be interested in that. Thank you. Okay, so I want to share with you some keys for success, models. So later, you know, my life is not your life. We all have a different life. We're all unique. But by learning some models, and it's like you have a key in your hand. You can open the door when you need to do so. So for keys for success, please. Thank you. So the first one is the first model I want to share with you is that you all have a genie inside you. Who knows what a genie is? Does anybody still know the story of Princess Yasmin and Aladdin? Okay, so I'm not so old yet. So remember that in that movie there's a genie, and you could ask the genie 3 questions. Actually, that genie is inside us. And one of the roles of leadership, becoming a leader, is to discover that genie inside you. And you could say that the genie is called your subconscious mind. And people say that your conscious mind, which you use a lot in university when you study, is only 10% of your mind. So 90% of your mind is deeper, subconscious and unconscious. And it talks about what do you do there. You have your long-term memory, your experiences, your beliefs, also your beliefs about yourself, your relationship patterns, your habits, your spiritual connection. But these are all things in your subconscious and your unconscious. So leadership is not just reading a book. So the model is, remember, psychologists say that your subconscious mind is 9 times bigger. You can see that here, right? This is conscious, subconscious, and 6,000 times more powerful. I don't know how they measure that, but it's a lot. So if you really want to have that power, you have to learn about your subconscious, not only about your conscious mind. Okay? So that's my first model to offer you. Now, I promised you, leadership is in your hand. And your hand has how many fingers? 5. So each finger means something. Let's start with the thumb. Next slide, please. So the thumb is about your vision, your dream. If you want to make a difference in the world, it starts with a dream. What do you dream? How big is your dream? You cannot really create something if you don't dream it first, have a vision first. Your second finger, your index finger in English, by the way, English is not my mother tongue, right? So we are all talking English today as a language of communication, right? So this finger helps to point you in the direction. It always can remind you to do that. Which way am I going? Am I going in the direction of my vision, or am I going in another direction? Which way I should go? So your index finger can remind you. The third finger I'm not going to raise, because that's a very powerful thing to do. But why is that finger so important? What can it remind us of? It reminds us that we should not always follow other people's advice. We should treasure our independent thinking. I would like you all to accept, to choose that you will live your life, not somebody else's life. All the other lives are actually already taken, but if you don't really design your life, you will end up living somebody else's life. Maybe your boss or your, other people you meet in your life. So you have to map it out. So the third finger can always remind us that yes, we listen and we work with other people, we are open to advice, but at the end of the day, we treasure our own independence to make our own choices. That leads us to our ring finger. The ring finger can remind us to be true to ourselves, what we are about, and to be authentic. Again, it has to do with not living somebody else's life, but discover who you are, what really makes you tick, and be true to yourself. This also has to do with values. And sometimes in life you have to make choices. Some of my friends, they even left a job sometime because something happened in their job that they felt that's not true to them. So they have to make a consequence, they have to make a choice. One of my friends is an ambassador, and sometimes the government can change policy. I won't say in which country this lady is an ambassador. And her boss, the minister, have some new policy, and she said, you know, maybe it's good, but I cannot live with that policy. It's not, I'm not true to myself if I cannot defend that. So she said, please, can I leave? So sometimes you come in life to make such choices. And finally, your pinky finger, your smallest finger, reminds us to always be small, to remain open and humble, like you said. Even President Jokowi, in his position, he has an openness to listen. He goes and asks people, what are you doing? How is it going? So we should always have that openness and that smallness in us to learn. So I promised you the most simple model, your hand. So how does it do? Can you work with that? Okay. All right, let's look at some more models. I want to show you my daughter. My daughter is in college in Amsterdam, in Holland, and she just turned 21. Who among you, is anybody 21? Yeah? Some of you are 21? My daughter is 21, and she is a real young leader. She has a strong opinion, and she learns a lot. And I asked her, what do you think about leadership? And then she said, for her, leadership, actually this is 1 year ago, maybe she changed her mind. But last year she told me, leadership is about finding your passion and finding your voice. This is, by the way, when she graduated from high school. And she said, many young people around me, they haven't really found their passion yet. Okay, now I promised you a model that is harder. You know, you have to really work on this model. But it's a model that brings you to the fundamental perspectives of life. And when you master this model, you can use it almost everywhere. So this model, it looks actually very simple. It has 4 quadrants. It's like a cake. You cut the cake in 4. And it says that life has 4 irreducible perspectives. And these perspectives, you can call them simply I. I is the individual interior dimension. And we, which is the collective interior dimension. And then up here, we have it. That is an exterior individual. And here is its collective exterior. So let's look at the environment. I think many of you are familiar with systems approach. Who has come across systems thinking, systems approach? The environment is like a system, right? There's biological system, then there's communities that impact, there's economic system, political system, monetary system, so many systems, right? And many of these have to do with the environment. So when we talk about such systems, that perspective, it fits in this area. That's a part of reality, right? Now, here is where people behave in a certain way. Or when you're developing, what do you call this, a machine that composts and develops methane gas, or you can measure how much gas comes out, right? So it's an it. It's something that you can observe and you can measure it. What about this side? It's an interior side. It's something like the unconscious mind. What's your belief? Can you measure your belief? Not so easy, right? What can you measure about your brain? What can you measure about your brain? Do you know that you have a brain? You have a brain, right? And you have thoughts. Can you measure the thoughts? Not really. What you can measure are, for example, brain waves. You can put electrodes or ways of measuring. And those things are sort of here. This is where you can measure your brain. But this is where your thoughts are. Now, because you cannot measure your thoughts, does it mean you don't have thoughts? No, you have thoughts, right? And you have experiences. You have beliefs. You have a vision, right? With your thumb. So these are equally important, but they are ruled by different paradigms, different ways of measuring. What about here? So here is where we talk about culture, what's acceptable, how do you do things. When I come to you and I greet you, I say, hello, I'm Wouter, and we shake hands. But in some other country, people don't do that. They do maybe like this, right? Or they bow like in Japan. They don't shake hands very much. So we have patterns, we have cultures, we have ways of doing things, we have ways that are acceptable and not. Can you easily measure them? Can you measure them as easy as your economic system or your environmental system? Not so easy, right? But are they not important because you cannot measure them? They are important, right? So what I'm showing you here is that reality is made up of 4 irreducible dimensions. And everywhere you are, at any time, those 4 dimensions arise at the same time. Like here, I'm talking, I have a microphone, it has a battery. I don't know how many percent is in the battery still. I can measure it, it's here, right? I have some thoughts, you have some thoughts. You experience something inside you. You say, okay, maybe something of what Coach Wouter is saying is useful. Maybe something else, not yet useful. So you have thoughts, right? And then you think, oh, we are all together here. How many of us are here? We all have a sort of common purpose. We behave according to some patterns. It's a culture of being here together. It's not so warm here because we have aircon. We have, maybe all of you have some money in your pocket, monetary system. So you see all these things happen at the same time. Now, why is it important? Why am I offering you this? Because human nature is that we sometimes focus too much on one side. Now, can we go to the next slide? Thank you. So, what are the dominant lenses that are used today? Are they on the left side or the right side? So, when you look at the international media, the newspapers, they say you can believe something if you can scientifically prove it. Right? Have you come across that? So I would say particularly in Western countries, it's very hard in Western countries to be credible if you believe something that cannot be scientifically measured nowadays. But what I want to share with you this morning is that is only part of reality. If your whole reality is only described in the it and the its, you're missing half of it. The world becomes flat. The interior dimensions that you said for President Jokowi are so important, you miss out on them. So when you are in any situation as a leader, as somebody who wants to help and make a difference, you scan your situation and say, okay, what's going on here? What happens inside people's minds? Or what's going on interior that I cannot see? What can I do to make a difference? So it looks simple, but I would recommend you to recognize those 4 quadrants which exist any moment in time and to embody all of the 4 quadrants at the same time. It's actually fun. When you learn to do this, you become much more aware. And for the last 3,000 years or more, the wise people in the world have always said that being a leader is about expanding your awareness. Have you heard about self-awareness? How do you say self-awareness in Bahasa Indonesia?
Kesadaran diri, kesadaran diri, kesadaran diri.
Kesadaran diri. Okay, so you cannot be a leader without self-awareness. So you have to learn more about yourself. So in the journey to become a leader, you have to do different things to get to know yourself better, but also the environment around you. So this tool helps you as a picture to visualize that. Okay, let's go on. Now, there are different ways of thinking. You might think in the world that everybody thinks the same about leadership, but it's actually not true. So I made a contrast here. It's a simplification, right? So it helps to understand, but don't believe it too much. So I talked the West and Asia. So in the West, leadership issues are often objectified outside people. Whereas in Asia, we tend to manifest leadership in people, like President Jokowi, and in relationships. In the West, in many books you read, you can talk about leadership as goal and value driven. It talks a lot about goals. Where are we going? What are our values? There's nothing wrong with that. That's quite helpful. But in Asia, leadership traditionally tends to be more context driven. So what I would like you to discover is that you can be both. It's not that you only have access to Asian ways of thinking. No. Now we live in a world that's very connected, but I would like you to see the distinction and the differences. And in sometimes you can choose a more Western approach or a more Asian approach. Right? Now, if we are too much goal and value driven, but we haven't internalized it, the risk is that between the vision and the implementation, we have lots of problems. If I simplify this again, you see it a lot in several Western countries. With all good intention, they talk about goals as if these goals have nothing to do with them, but they're very good in talking about them. But in my experience in Asia, people don't talk that strongly about goals unless they believe something about that goal themselves. When you do that, everything becomes personal and has a human touch. And there is not so much tension between your vision and doing what you say and implementing it. I think this is also what the new government in Indonesia wants. They want the cabinet, they want the mentality that where the difference between the goal and the vision and the actual implementation is become closer, right? Now, what you see a lot in the books is before you do something, you have to agree on the goal first. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I think it's also very helpful. But it's not the only way. Sometimes you can actually find your goals along the way. And if you read Asian philosophy, like Chinese philosophy, or perhaps Indonesian philosophy, and kebatinan thinking in Indonesia, you find often that there's flexibility. And the goals can be enacted on the way. You don't have to know everything in advance. So what I want you to pick up is that there's not just one way of thinking, although a lot of the books you read that are coming internationally, they tend to be reflecting more this way of thinking. But I want you to know that that's not the only kind of thinking just because there are many books that say so. Okay, I talked already about that, so we okay, I mentioned to you leadership is an inside job. Can you read this? Maybe the text is not so clear. I'll read it for you. We see the world not as it is. This is very strange. We see the world not as it is, but as we are. Think of it this way. Since you were young, if you compare yourself to an operating system and a computer, you have downloaded so many programs. Those programs are running you. And sometimes you cannot see the outside world except through the programs that you have already downloaded in your 20 years or so of your life. So we see the world as we are conditioned to see it. So when you want to develop yourself to become a change maker, a leader, you have to be aware, become more aware of this, that the world may actually be different from what you think. And that you have to transform. It's like you wonder, maybe I need a new download, an upgrade of my operating system, okay? Or I need new glasses, because the ones I have, they have a certain color, and that's why I see the world that way. And another thing is that our thoughts are incredibly important and incredibly powerful. One famous thinker says, we actually become what we think about most of the time. Now that's why you also can become a leader and an influential change maker. If you have this thought in your mind and you think about it often, you get up in the morning with that kind of thinking, gradually your operating system adapts to that. And your outlook, your mindset changes. You listen to others, but you're not necessarily dominated or influenced or determined by others. Next, please. Okay. So, leadership, if you go to university, or when you are here in university, or later in life you go to a training, can you compare yourself for a moment to a glass? You're a glass. And then education is like filling the glass with water. Or later when you go to a training, you learn new skill, you practice skill. It's like pouring water in the glass. Leadership and becoming a leader is not the same. It's becoming a bigger glass. It can actually be a bit strange and also a bit painful because you get stretched. You cannot just keep the same way of thinking. And famous people, this looks a bit brave, maybe you cannot see it, but later in the PDF, I put here some thinking. A famous coach has said, what got you here, what got you to where you are now, will not get you where you want to go. So you have to learn new things. I also like this one by Oprah Winfrey. How many of you watch Oprah or have watched any shows of Oprah sometime? Anybody? Actually, Oprah has a really nice talk about a year ago in Stanford University. You can download it. It's very inspirational. It's about an hour. She has a conversation and she explains her own life, how she discovered how to be a leader through her experiences. And people said, isn't it difficult? You are a black woman, and you are so influential now, but don't you